are doing our very first of a new series that we are devising, Meet Your She-Hero, for young girls on how to get started to pursue a career. I'd like to introduce you all to one of the great women of television. I've known Margaret for many years, and it has just been a rare privilege and an honor to know her. And back in my early days, I actually worked at a company that was chaired by Margaret, and she became somewhat of a mentor to me in the entertainment business, and I value her advice and insight about as highly as anybody could. But Margaret has had one of the most stellar careers in television. She would hate me for saying this, but she's one of the most highly regarded women in Hollywood. So she has worked on pretty much every kind of children or family show that has come down through the pipeline over the years. Some of the places that she worked in back in the early days, she was with Hanna-Barbera for a while, then with Marvel. She launched Fox Kids Network with Fox, and that started the X-Men franchise, which was a huge hit. She also worked for Jim Henson and launched the Hallmark Channel. Then she started her own production company, The Hatchery, which is where I met Margaret. And then she ran the new network that was called The Hub. That launched, I think, about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. That was a joint venture between Hasbro and Discovery, and Margaret brought many new shows into the mix for kids that were just a big hit. So Margaret, it is our great pleasure to have you here with us today. We're thrilled to have a nice, intimate conversation, and we will really look forward to getting some of your insight and advice on things. I thought I'd start the ball rolling with my question, which is, Margaret's got a wonderful story about getting started in the business. One of the things that I love about SheHeroes is so many of our SheHeroes ended up where they are through some wayward turns or some, reversals of decisions or choices. And Margaret's got a wonderful story about that. So Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll make this short. I got to California and I stayed for 2 weeks with friends who lived, of all places, in Palos Verdes, California, one of the most beautiful areas of the state. And I vowed to come back when I finished graduate school, which is what I did. I went back to California in December of 1970, and I had a one-way plane ticket and $40. So, I was very confident because I knew I'd be staying with the same family friends. I did come to California. I knew no one in any business, and I started looking around for a job. My major in college and in graduate school was political science. So I tried to get a job in city government, but failed. And eventually the people that I lived with said to me, why don't you try the networks? And I said, networks? What networks? And they said, TV. I said, well, I don't know anything about TV. And they said, so what? So I made appointments with CBS and ABC. I had interviews at their personnel department. I'll make this very short, but it's sort of a funny story. It was not funny at the time. When I got to CBS on a pouring down rainy day in December of 1970, the man that interviewed me made me take a typing test. And I said, please don't make me take a typing test. I can type anything you want, but don't give me a test. And he put a big clock right in front of me and wound it up and said, type. I failed the typing test. And he said, don't call us and we won't call you. That's literally what he said. Before I left, I said to him, what about those jobs of those young people my age out there in the little uniforms? And they said, oh, you mean the pages? They said, well, that's a management training position. Everybody starts as a page. I said, well, can I try that? And he said, no, we don't hire women for that. All our girls start as secretaries. So I did. So that afternoon, I drove to ABC. It was pouring down rain. I was in a borrowed car, and a man came out of a side street, ran a red light, and plowed into my car and wrecked the car that I had borrowed from the family that I was staying with. Needless to say, I was mortified. By the time I got to ABC, I was dripping wet and crying. And I told them at ABC what had happened, and they were so they were so competitive with CBS and so outraged that they took pity on me and they said, we think you've got a great opportunity here. And so I started out as a clerk typist at ABC. They didn't give me a typing test. They actually lied for me, said I could type a certain amount of words, and I kept saying I can't, and they said, yes, you can. So that's what I meant about good luck, knowing the right people who were kind, a serendipitous situation. I was very excited to start there. I knew nothing about television, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because when you don't know anything about television, you don't know anything about a job area, you have to really knuckle down and learn everything you can and not be shy about saying, I don't understand, please explain. So that was my start. It's a little bit of a winding road. I'm sorry I took up so much time about it, but I've never looked back. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, I don't think that was too long of a story at all. I find that absolutely fascinating. Once you got into television, did the bug like really take you over? Did you become just like addicted to networks and programming and making television? Or how long did it take to get into that groove?
No, I didn't, because I was always aware of how much I didn't know. And so I really went on a quest to learn. And so I spent all my spare time asking questions. I was at ABC on the lot in Hollywood, and it was the same place that KABC, the local radio, the local TV station was situated. So every evening I'd go over and watch the local news being shot, and then I'd go over and I'd work with the film editors, and they were very nice and sort of took me under their wing. Most people that were starting out in television had majored in college in the field, in related fields, and or their parents or brothers or uncles were in the business, so they were steeped in it, and everybody knew a lot about it, and I knew nothing. So I was more focused on trying to fill in the blanks, and I had no shyness about saying, teach me, I don't know, I don't understand. And what I found, which I found throughout my career, is if you tell someone you don't know something and you show interest and or enthusiasm, they will be happy to share with you their knowledge. And that's where I was focused, is learning. I still, to this day, I'm still learning about the business because it's changing so much. There's a lot to learn all the time.
One of the, you've launched networks, you've created so much programming or shepherded so many different creative ideas through the creative process. What would you say is the favorite part of your career? The most creative or exciting or enjoyable section?
Well, there are probably two areas that I find the most exciting and the most rewarding. One is actually building companies, building teams, mentoring people, finding a jewel of a person who I recognize has talent, and he or she may not even know that they have. I have found over the course of my career that many people rise to the occasion. If you give them more than they think they can handle it. And it's not to push them to the wall, it's for them to learn about their own capabilities. So I've enjoyed building companies where I get to hire the team and kind of mold them into a well-oiled organization. I did it with several companies, not the least of which was Fox Kids, and of course the Hallmark Channel, and the last network that I built, The Hub, which was 2010, Lori, when we launched that. It's now Discovery Kids, Discovery Family rather, excuse me. But the other part of the job that I find the most rewarding is when you start off with an idea. Maybe it's a one line, maybe it's a drawing, maybe it's for one situation, I remember Joe Barbera and I were having lunch together, and he drew a character on a napkin. And I said, that's so cute. And I grabbed the napkin from him and I said, that's really cute. And he says, let's make a show out of it. So the excitement of going from a little napkin drawing to watching in a screening, a series that our team created with us, we all worked together, is very gratifying. And to this day, the other day there was an announcement in the trades where Nickelodeon has paid $1 gazillion to do new Smurfs. Well, I was part of the team that birthed the Smurfs on television. We worked with the creator of the comics from Belgium, and that was in the 1980s. And I got a tremendous rush of pride and happiness that show that we birthed and spent so much time on is now coming back yet again. And that, of course, happens over and over, particularly in animation.
Well, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. I know that, you've been responsible for some of the biggest kids hits in history, but one of the big ones that has a very interesting story behind it is the story of the mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Oh, yeah.
Does everybody in the group know what that show is? Are you all familiar with it? Okay.
Well, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers did become a phenomenon. It frankly became much bigger than either the producer or I thought it would be, but we did think it would be successful. We just had no idea how successful. Power Rangers was an existing show for many years in Japan, and it had been on the air for 23 years when it came to my attention. And it came to my attention through Stan Lee. Stan worked for me at Marvel Productions, which was the film division of Marvel. And he came to me one day with a video cassette. Now, probably half the people on this phone, if they're young, they have no idea what a video cassette is. 3/4-inch video cassette. And he came to my office waving this video cassette, and he said, "Maggie," which is what he called me, "you've got to take a look at this." So I did. And I said to him after I looked at it, I walked back down to his office and I said, "Stan, it's all in Japanese." He says, "I know, but it doesn't matter, does it? Wasn't it fun?" I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was pretty interesting, and it was really silly with those monsters." That was what became Power Rangers. Stan and I went out and pitched it to all 3 networks, and they basically said to me, "How could you? How could you, the producer of the award-winning Muppet Babies, come in with this horrible show called Power Rangers? It's cheap, it's stupid, it's silly, it's terrible." So every network slammed the door in our face and chastised me for even considering it. I thought it was fun and silly. Anyway, we didn't sell it, so I let the rights go.
Oh.
And a friend of mine, several years later, picked up the rights, Haim Saban, who was a producer. He picked up the rights and he started pitching it around town and couldn't sell it. So he then put it on the shelf. After I launched Fox Kids Network in 1990, once we got up and on the air, I went to all the producers, including Haim. I went to Haim and I said, I'm looking for a show that's counter programming. I want to put it on at 7 in the mornings, Monday through Friday. And I want to counter program what everybody else is doing, which is softer comedy, not action. I want something that's going to attract boys, but it'll have something for girls too. I don't want a straight action show with no female characters. I want to have girls represented just as powerful as the boys, but a lot of comedy and really silly. What have you got? And Haim said to me, "Just one moment." A few minutes later, he came running down the hall with a video cassette, and he put it on, and I looked at the footage. I said, "I know this footage. I say, this is what Stan and I tried to sell 5 years ago." That's how, so I said, "I'll buy it." And he was shocked. That's how Power Rangers started. Now, the thing that's interesting for those of you that may have recalled Power Rangers or even know it from today, my bosses at Fox and our affiliated station general managers hated it. And when I sent a preview of it after we were in production a while, several of our stations said they wouldn't air it. And as a matter of fact, the weekend before we premiered the series, I took a little 3-day vacation with my husband and my son and went to Santa Barbara, and I got a telex. For those of you that don't know what telexes are, it's like an email. It's a telex. I got a telex from my boss at Fox saying, "The affiliates looked at the episodes you sent for them to see. They hate it. They don't want you to air it. Please don't air it. What other show can you put on in its place?" This is 3 days before it was to premiere. So I wrote on the telex and sent it back, telexed it back to my boss, or I wrote her a telex and said, "Trust me, it's going to work. I've got a backup show if it doesn't work, but please let me put it on the air. And she did. The chairman of Fox, Lucy Salhaney, to her credit, she did.
Yay.
Yes. The show aired, and it aired without being carried on 5 of our top stations. And it blew the socks off the ratings. It was through the roof. And eventually, after about a month, all 5 stations started picking it up again. And that was, and I think so that it became historical. It was so successful. And fortunately, I was right. You know, you're not always right. Nobody's always right. But it did get boys and girls. Girls loved it as much as boys. And it did so well for us. It's still on the air today. Its ownership is now with Disney. And it's quite a phenomenon. But I would say the moral of the story for me, to remind myself, is, and I learned over the years, if I really believed in something, my knees may be knocking, I might have been nervous, I might have been worried, but I still fought for what I believed in, and I stood up for the show and the producer, and fortunately it worked. Doesn't always work, but it works more often than not.
Well, and on that note, Eleanor, one of our guests, hey Eleanor, would like to know, what has it been like to be a female in this industry? You had to dig in your heels on the Power Rangers. So has that been sort of typical of most of the projects you've had to shepherd or fight for? I feel a couple of things. Let me answer it this way. I know I've been very fortunate, and a lot of men have given me some great opportunities and have believed in me. Having said that, nothing that I have ever done or achieved has been without a fight. I think if you're a woman, you have to be prepared to fight for everything. That's what it comes down to. You have to, and you don't have to be pugilistic, but you have to have fortitude, and you have to stick with your guns, and you have to be persistent, and you have to not back down, and you don't have to scream and yell, but you have to stand up for yourself and what you believe. So I truly have said to myself and to others around me when we're working on something and it's so hard to achieve success, I said, why is everything such a fight? But it is. Everything worth having or worth achieving is a result of a hard-fought battle. Well, I think it was a bit of a boys' club when you first got started, but would you say that you've seen a lot of changes in the makeup of power in the entertainment business today? Well, there's certainly more women in various roles successfully and doing very well. And there are more women decision makers. Having said that, still a boys' club. It's still a boys' club because boys are boys. They love to play games. They love to meet for poker nights. They are natural networkers. They don't take things personally. We women can take things very personally. I'll never forget an experience I had at ABC as I was a production manager. I worked my way up as a production manager at ABC, and I experienced 2 ABC program executives, 2 men, battling out royale, having a major argument in front of me. I was there showing promos and taking notes for the promotional campaigns we had developed for their shows. And at the end of their literal brawl, I thought they were going to come to blows. They said, let's meet for drinks. And they did. And that's not how women are. And we're so sincere. So boys naturally congregate and they're different, and we should celebrate those differences, but we should recognize those differences. What has changed in Hollywood is that there are more women in more roles that are meaningful, and men seem to be accepting that. It doesn't mean that they don't have their boys' club, but at the end of the day, they just want to be successful too. And if it means being courteous or collaborative with a woman, most of them are willing to do it, and some of them are willing to do it gladly. Who do you think has better taste in programming, men or women? Or more of a sagacity with it or a talent at it?
I wouldn't say that women necessarily have better taste. I think that it's always great to have a woman on the team because women are more empathetic. And also the things that interest women are, if women are involved, it's more reflected on the screen. You know, when I launched the Hallmark Channel, we got a lot of, there was a lot of, I wouldn't say snide remarks, but you know, oh, there's a women's programming. Women's just said, well, Hallmark Channel is enormously successful today. And nobody puts it down anymore, that it's catering to women and it's stories that women enjoy. And so I don't know that there's an answer for that. I always think that a writing team is best if it has a mix of men and women. But a writing team without women, I think, is not always as effective.
Okay, now here's a question for you. A lot of our friends online here would like to know, what is your advice to give to people starting out in the industry or trying to get a break in the industry when they know nobody and they're, you know, basically starting out cold?
Well, first of all, I will acknowledge one big difference. I mean, there are many differences, but one big difference between when I started and today is I actually got to go into the personnel department. I knew no one, obviously, as I told the story, but I got to go in and be interviewed by a human being. And I think one of the big challenges today is that you have to apply online. And that is very challenging. And I can't say that I have a solution for that, but I would still try to get into the personnel department at any company. And I would be, and my biggest advice is to be willing to take any job they offer, any job. I've often counseled young people to do that, and I've had a lot of wonderful success stories come back to me of thank you for your advice. You know, I started as a runner. I had a master's degree, but I started as a runner. I started as a clerk typist. I started as this, I started as that. No job is too small to get your foot in the door. And once you have the foot in the door, you get many opportunities. At most companies, particularly production companies and studios, are all understaffed. Many companies, not most, many companies are understaffed. So they will often say to an assistant or a runner or a, you know, a person who gets the coffee, hey, you want to read a script for me tonight and tell me what you think? Yes, you do. So those are the ways. I mean, if you can just get your foot in the door and apply for whatever job is available, apply for it and get that interview, because once you get in, it's a very opportunistic environment to prove yourself. Now, the other thing is there are intern programs. The TV Academy has an excellent intern program. There are a variety of production companies that have intern programs. So if you contact the production companies, for example, the production company that produces Law and Order, the Wolf Company, they have interns every year. They bring them from all over the country. You just apply. So you can go online and find out what intern programs are available. That's another, that didn't exist when I was starting out. The only opportunity when I was starting out were pages, but pages were only men, young men. They didn't hire women at the time. Now today they do. But that would be my advice, is to try to get your foot in the door in any job. No job is too small.
Okay, and our next question, we've got questions pouring in. What was your favorite project that you worked on?
Oh, wow. There's no one project. There are several projects that were my favorite. My first favorite project was the Smurfs. Developing that, I would go to Belgium quite often and meet with the creator and the writers and the producer and then we brought him over to the Hanna-Barbera studios and we worked together. That was a very special time. And I'll tell you a quick story about the Smurfs. Fred Silverman, who recently passed away, was the head of program. He was the president of NBC, and he's the one, I have to give him credit. He called us and said, there are these little toys that I found in the market, they're called Smurfs. And Fred said to me and to Joe Barbera on the phone, we think that Fred said, I think they'd make a good cartoon series. And so Joe looked at me and said, what are Smurfs? I said, I don't know what Smurfs are. So I sent one of my production assistants, who later became a vice president of one of my companies. I told a production assistant to go find these Smurfs, and he went to a local car wash and found Smurf keychains. And this is a serendipitous moment. He brought the keychains back to Joe Barbera's office. I was still in Joe Barbera's office at his conference table. And he pours a box of keychains out on the table, all little Smurfs. And Joe Barbera picks one up and says, wow, all these little blue bastards look just alike. And I said, oh, they're so cute. And he said, it's your show. I got to develop the show because I thought they were cute. It was one of my favorite shows. And it was one of my favorites because it was unique. It was classic in tone, but it was approachable. The storylines, we had a wonderful producer and a wonderful writing team that I worked with. And the stories meant something to everybody. We did stories. We did a story based on a situation that I encountered as a child. We all had favorite stories that we put, the theme into it of what we had experienced as kids. So the Smurfs and later at another company, the Muppet Babies, were probably my two favorite shows that I worked on that I had a real emotional connection with. They meant a lot to me. And when we got Emmy Awards for them, they meant the most to me.
Well, I have to jump in here. Stephen Lynn asked, did the Smurfs only have one single female character? And what did you think of that?
Yes, the Smurfs, maybe. It was a bone of contention. Peo, or Pierre Colliford was his actual name, but his pen name was Peo, the cartoonist that created Smurfs. Peo and I and the NBC executive, who was a woman, went round and round, us against him, trying to get him to allow us to put another female character in it. And Peo's sentiment was, we don't need another female character because she's smarter than all 100 Smurfs put together. So finally, one day, Peo came into my office with a drawing. I still have the drawing in my files, a little pencil drawing. It's adorable, of a baby Smurf. And he said, for you, Margaret, I've created a baby Smurf. And I said, oh, she's so cute. He said, not a she. I said, it's a he. He says, we'll never know. Baby Smurf was introduced, and Baby Smurf, you never know if Baby Smurf is a boy or a girl.
That's wonderful. Okay, now here we have a question from Adam R. He says, hi, Margaret. I consider Power Rangers as the little engine that could of superhero properties. As time goes on, a lot of people disregard Power Rangers as that cheesy, stupid show. What did you see in it that would resonate with kids and adults to this day? And also, thank you so much for bringing this show to the States. Fans owe you so much for it.
Sometimes I think that's going to be on my headstone. What I saw in Power Rangers was what I liked as a kid. When I went to the movie theaters in the 1950s, God forbid, a long time ago, they had double and triple features. And I remember specifically sitting in the theater with my brother. I was probably, 6, 7 years old, watching The Creature from the Black Lagoon, one of the scariest pictures I've ever seen. And I was, hiding my hands and screaming and yelling with all the other kids. And then I said to my brother, my little brother, I think I see a scene in the monster's costume. I see a scene. And I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever. Then I thought this movie was a scream. And after that, whenever I went to monster pictures, I always looked for the strings, the wires, the seams, whatever, and I thought it was funny. So when I looked at Power Rangers and saw the cheesy production, it reminded me of how I felt about all those monsters. I thought they were great. I thought they were fun. I didn't take them. Think about it, Power Rangers. One of the biggest monsters was a pig that came to Earth to eat all the food. So I think that what enabled me to enjoy Power Rangers and not see it for just a cheesy show was to remember how I felt as a child and how I wasn't bothered that it was cheesy. I just knew it was exciting and fun and adventuresome and creative and imaginative.
Oh, that's wonderful. So here's a question from the Craig family. What was the worst advice that you were ever given? And they're asking because they have a rising 4th grade girl and a 7th grade girl. So it's all very relevant.
Wow, the worst advice. Worst advice. I have to think about that for a minute. I mean, I have gotten some bad advice. I try not to remember it. I remember the best advice. I don't remember the worst. Well, I do think I know what the worst advice was. When I was early in my days as a programming executive, a young programming executive at NBC, the worst advice I ever had was from a series of people who kept telling me that that girls didn't like action adventure. Girls didn't like action adventure. And I always was bad. I was my head, I felt like I was hitting my head against the wall because I loved action adventure. Now, when I was a child, action adventure meant, picture movies with you were in the jungles with, natives chasing you. I know it's not politically correct today, but that's what it was. But it was action adventure, and sometimes there were female characters that were strong, sometimes male characters. Tarzan was as interesting to a girl as it was to a boy. Maybe not for the same reasons, it doesn't matter. I loved mysteries. I loved Westerns, cowboy, Dale Rogers and Gene Autry, all those when I was little. So I kept getting told, because I wasn't in charge of programming at NBC of children's, I was number 2 for a long time, for a while. But I was told that if you're going to find an action adventure show, it's not going to get any girls, so forget it. And by the way, that's why Power Rangers kept getting turned down too, because they said, it's going to turn off the girls, only boys. And in syndication, it's okay to only go after one gender, but on a TV network, you have to have maximum appeal with boys and girls. So I didn't listen to that advice ultimately. But sometimes I had to follow that advice if my boss insisted that we buy a show or not buy a show based on that criteria.
Okay, here's another one from Stephen Lynn. What shows today would you recommend for kids age 6 through 9? What's out there that you think is working well?
Not a lot. I'm sorry to say that. There's some lovely shows for younger children. There are a lot of preschool and younger 6, 7-year-olds, 4, 6, 7-year-olds. There are a few shows, but think about it. Shows like SpongeBob SquarePants are still on. They're still performing, and they are because it's still so refreshingly different from so many other shows. SpongeBob had a guileless, sweet main character, SpongeBob, and I remember when that show was originally pitched and everybody thought it wasn't going to work because a sponge. And not only a sponge, but he was so sweet. Well, that's what worked. The comedy works wonderful. Now I'm being a little too dismissive. There are some good shows out there, and I can't, of course, now that you ask me, I can't think of a single one. I have watched some shows that are good. But I find the storytelling not as effective as what we strove for. The production values in many shows today are better than ever. There's better animation, better live action, but the storytelling doesn't have the depth and the strength of character as much as we used to focus on it years ago. So I hope that this next generation that are the decision makers are going to be putting more of that into the shows.
What do you think that's reflective of? That lack of, like, you know, making something more meaningful? Or
Well, I think that I think that the internet has a lot to do with it, and I'm not damning the internet by any means, but short form programming is a lot of fun to watch, but it doesn't teach you the art or capture the audience for very long. It's short form, and part of the reason short form works with kids so much is it's short form, so that you don't have to have their attention for too long. But by the same token, half-hour storytelling is an art, and when it's done well, it's masterful. It can hold an audience wonderfully. So I don't think I have all the answers as to why it's happened today. I think our business is one of trends. And I think it's been a trend to be more focused on the animation timing and direction, quick, moves and clever timing, and not so much on the art of the half-hour story. So I think that it will change and evolve again. It's a very cyclical business.
Well, and here's a question related to that from Elizabeth Diddy, and she asks, are there common elements in the family programming you've championed over the years? With so many lasting hits, you've got a magic touch. Would love to hear what you would like to see writers bring to the table in their storytelling for family programming.
Well, I think I just touched on part of it, and that's the art of the story itself, of really, one of the most successful shows, and one of them that I failed to mention that I really enjoyed working on, was Goosebumps. Now, Goosebumps was an interesting situation because at the time I committed to that series, the industry attitude was anthologies wouldn't work. As a matter of fact, rarely were there ever anthologies on anywhere on television. And there was sort of an attitude of they're doomed, it won't work. Well, Goosebumps was an anthology series. Every episode was different characters, different stories, but it worked wonderfully well because it was a strong concept. But it was also strongly written, strong storytelling with a beginning, middle, and end, and interesting characters. So I think that, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Now I'm thinking of all the stories that I've done and gone from my brain.
Is there one story you'd want to see brought to the world?
Oh, no, there are many stories I'd like to see brought to the world. Many, many. One of the things that's fun in this industry is that whenever I've started a company, I go to the stable of writers and say, okay, what's your favorite property you haven't been able to sell? And usually you'll find a gem in that. And so there are many things I'd like to do that I haven't been able to do yet. Everybody has a good story, or many people have a good story, not everybody. And I'd like to bring some back that we did over the years too.
Okay, well, here is another question from Emily, one of our board members, and she would like us to have a little discussion about, our racist views today have been created by, historically we see like Black men, for example, as a criminal or a prisoner or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of that, or how that may be changing in some way?
Well, I would say, not to try to defend what we've done, but in defense of what we've done, that children's television has actually been on the forefront of trying to break through the stereotypes, starting in the 1970s. There was a remarkable group of people in the 70s that became very critical of television. And one of them was a woman named Peggy Charon. She created a group called Action for Children's Television. Now, Peggy was primarily focused on the amount of commercialization in children's shows. And she felt that the advertisers were taking advantage of children by commingling animated product in their commercials, and it was confusing kids. They didn't know the difference between a program and a commercial. And there's been a lot of discussion about how much they really could discern. But the point is, Peggy was like a 5'2" powerhouse. She was a housewife from Massachusetts, I believe. And she went to Washington, and boy, she became a force to reckon with. And we were always across the table from each other, but we had a lot of mutual respect for each other. Peggy's brought so much attention to children's television that we became an area of programming that, and it wasn't just me that did this, it was all three networks. I was at NBC at the time, and we created an advisory board. And on the advisory board was a couple of teachers, a child psychologist, a pediatrician, a law enforcement officer. We had a whole interesting group. And the purpose of this advisory board was to advise us, the programmers in children's television, about what the issues were facing children, what the issues were regarding stereotyping, negative stereotyping, how we could do better. And all the networks embarked on having experts associated with them in children's television. So we were actually at the forefront of having, making sure we represented cartoons. And it took time, there's no question about it. But having characters, all kinds of characters, not just white characters, but all races. And we also having representative females in our shows, not just males. It used to be almost all male television programming. And we learned a lot, and we learned sometimes the hard way. We'd be criticized for what we did or didn't do. It's still a work in progress, but I would say that broadcast television has been really very responsive to the pressures and the issues, and have tried to reflect it in programming.
Oh, that's great. Now, we talked a little bit about short form. As you know, the Quibi or Quilby, whatever that thing is that just launched, yeah, which is actually not doing all that great. But what is your view about where entertainment is going in terms of the short form discussion and content creation?
Well, I think Quilby was, I certainly admired their effort to make that happen, Jeffrey Katzenberg and his partner. But they spent an awful lot of money, and that may ultimately be a problem. I don't know, it's a little early to tell. I don't know how distinctive it is, but I wouldn't say it's working or not working because of short form, because TikTok is working with kids. And that can be very short form, but I think their kids can partake in it. They can contribute to it. I think short form is here to stay. I think it's got a lot of growth as far as learning how to do it effectively. That's what I think is really the challenge. It's very hard to tell a story in a short form, but if you do it well, it can be masterful and very compelling. So I think short form is here to stay. I'm not sure if it's here. I don't know if it's here to stay in the form of Quilby, but to be fair, it started out, and it doesn't mean, it started out roughly, but a lot of things take time.
Do you think it will replace long form ever, or is that
No, never. It might be here to stay, but it's not going to replace long form, in my opinion.
Okay, here is an interesting question from Taiwan. If you had an opportunity, which show or shows would you resurrect today?
Well, I hate to give away secrets. Well, there are many shows I would resurrect, starting with Goosebumps. And in animation, there are quite a few. Obviously, Smurfs was a wonderful idea for Nickelodeon to pick up Smurfs and do new episodes. Disney is doing new Muppet Baby. Almost everything I've ever done, they're doing new versions now. I think Alvin and the Chipmunks is ripe for to be done new. I think that was a wonderful. I didn't do Alvin and the Chipmunks, but I recognized that it was a delightful, fun property. I think, and by the way, I shouldn't overlook some of the Sesame Street characters are still doing very well, and I think they should recreated and resurrected or kept up on the air. But I don't want to give too much away because
Not done.
our shows that I'd like to do more of.
Well, Margaret is currently the chairwoman for Genius Brands, which is a new company that it's a Netflix for kids, and they recently just announced a major animated program with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has just stepped up to invest in the company. So are you excited about that? We're going to wrap up this meeting, but I thought I'd give you an opportunity to speak to the future of what you're committed to.
Well, thank you for that. Now, in full disclosure, my chairmanship is really, it's more of an advisory role. I'm not operating the company because they have a good team to do that. But providing oversight and strategy and guidance. I am excited for them. They've got a couple of good shows on the air. One of them is Llama Llama on Netflix, which is a delightful show based on a book series. A great show for younger children. And Secret Millionaires Club with Warren Buffett. It provides a real service of teaching financial discernment for children, something that they need. So yes, the new kindergarten show was created with Stan Lee.
Wow.
And Stan got a big kick out of doing this with Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I'm happy it's going to come to the air. So yes, this is a new position to keep my hand in the game, I suppose.
Okay, well, Margaret, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I don't know if anybody had any remaining questions. You can always email me and I can forward them on to Margaret, but we do want to be respectful of her time. So we'll be wrapping up the meeting. Sophia, did you have anything you'd like to say to our group?
I just want to say, Margaret, you are so inspiring. And you have a hand in every show, any show related to children. It's just like, wow. And
I've been very fortunate. I've been fortunate and I love the area. So it works out.
It's so inspiring. And I think it's inspiring for everybody. I speak for everybody on this call to see you, to see that a woman can do it, and to know for our young people that that they can do it, and that you can go in having no experience in knocking on a door, and that you can change your decision to go from X or Y, and that's fine. And I hope that it'll be okay. I know we have 2 young aspiring women in the field that'll want to reach out to you via Lori, if you're cool with that connection. We'll try.
Sure, I'd be happy to email them or talk to them.
Awesome.
Lori can coordinate it.
Awesome. And you can see in the chat, everybody's just like such a fan. And
I'd like to add one thing, Sophia, to a point that you made. The one thing I'll say about the entertainment industry is it's a great place for women.
Huh.
We've made so many inroads in all areas, including areas where we were completely shut out for many years, like directing and writing teams. There's many good women writers, and now directors are emerging, and studio personnel, executives. It really, at the end of the day, if you're focused on content, if you're good at what you do, you can excel, as long as you stand by your principles.
That is great. I want to thank again everybody for joining. We're going to be doing this as a series over the summer and maybe over time. And if you want to contribute to supporting SheHeroes, we are making videos of SheHeroes like Margaret and others who are crushing the glass ceiling and just inspiring all of us.
Thank you very much.